Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we're going deep into all this research about mindfulness meditation you've given us
Yeah.
and how it affects the brain.
Okay.
We've got excerpts from a scientific review called The Neuroscience of Mindfulness Meditation
Right.
and an article called This is Your Brain on Mindfulness.
It's fascinating stuff.
Yeah, really interesting how mindfulness has been talked about for centuries. You know, its potential to reduce stress and help us focus better, but now we can actually see what's happening in the brain thanks to all this brain imaging technology.
It's amazing, right? Like,
Yeah.
for centuries, people have talked about mindfulness changing how they experience life.
Right.
And, bringing all these benefits, like you said, reduced stress, improved attention, and a deeper sense of self-awareness.
Yeah.
But now, neuroscience is actually starting to provide evidence for these claims.
That's what I find so cool about all this research.
Yeah.
One of the biggest surprises for me was that meditation can actually change the structure of the brain. I always thought the adult brain was basically fixed,
Right.
like a finished puzzle.
Like, we're stuck with what we got.
Yeah?
But studies are now showing that certain areas of the brain, like the prefrontal cortex and the insula, are actually thicker in people who meditate regularly.
Okay, wait, so hold on.
Yeah.
We're talking about physically thickening the parts of the brain responsible for decision-making,
Yep.
empathy,
That's right.
even self-awareness.
Yeah.
Isn't that like a superpower or something?
Back of it is right.
Yeah.
It's like strength training, but for your brain. Specifically for those skills that help you navigate the complexities of life
Right?
and thrive in social situations. And what's even more remarkable is that these changes can happen relatively quickly.
Wait, really?
Yeah.
How quickly are we talking?
Well, one study found that structural changes were happening in as little as 8 weeks.
Wow. Okay, so 8 weeks.
Yeah. And keep in mind,
Yeah.
these weren't monks meditating all day.
Right.
These were everyday people with jobs and busy lives.
So like you and me.
Yeah, just like you.
So we've seen how meditation physically changes the brain. But what about its impact on how we experience the world day to day?
Right.
Let's talk about attention, because I think everyone struggles with feeling distracted these days.
Oh, for sure.
Our minds are constantly bombarded with information.
Absolutely. And that's where mindfulness meditation can really help.
Okay.
It strengthens our ability to focus and resist distractions.
One of the researchers mentioned in the articles is Mishi Jha at the University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah, I know her work.
She used computer-based tests to see how meditation affects attention. Can you tell us a little bit more about what she found?
Yeah, so Jha's research is groundbreaking.
Oh,
She found that even short periods of meditation,
like how short?
like 12 minutes a day,
Okay.
can lead to noticeable improvements in working memory. And as people practice for longer periods,
Yeah.
the results become even more significant.
Okay, so it's not just about being able to focus on one thing for longer, right?
Right.
Does it also change the quality of our attention?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
And the research suggests that it does.
Okay.
Another study we have here involved a month-long retreat at Shambhala Mountain Center.
Wow, a month.
Yeah, researchers found that more experienced meditators actually shifted to a more open and alert type of awareness.
Interesting.
Their minds were less prone to wandering.
That makes sense to me.
Yeah.
It's like mindfulness isn't just about laser focus. It's about developing a wider, more panoramic awareness,
I like
being present in the moment
Yeah,
without getting lost in thought.
exactly.
Yeah.
And this shift in attention might be a key factor in some of the other benefits of mindfulness,
Okay.
like feeling less stressed or less reactive emotionally. It's all connected, We're really starting to understand how mindfulness can change how we experience and regulate our emotions.
There's that decoupling effect that you mentioned earlier, right? Where
Yeah.
two different networks in the brain are involved.
Right.
One focused on our inner narratives and the other on present moment experience.
Yeah. Mindfulness seems to help us disengage from that constant internal chatter and become more present.
Oh, I see.
The research from the University of Toronto is especially interesting here.
How so?
Well, they found that meditators were better at activating the network for direct experience, while also weakening the link between these two networks.
That's so interesting
Yeah.
because it's almost like mindfulness is helping us loosen the grip of that inner critic.
Oh, yeah, I see what you
Now,
mean.
that voice that's always analyzing and judging everything. Does it make sense?
It makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
By creating that space between ourselves and our internal dialogue. we can be more present and open to what's happening around us without all the mental noise. It's almost like mindfulness meditation is changing how we experience the world.
Okay.
Not just lessening stress or helping us focus, but shifting how we see ourselves.
Okay, but how does all this happen in the brain? I'm curious about the mechanisms behind these changes.
Well, one theory is that mindfulness strengthens certain brain regions. Like exercise strengthens muscles.
Okay.
At the cellular level, it could involve things like increased dendritic branching, synaptogenesis, or even neurogenesis.
Neurogenesis.
Yeah, which is the creation of new brain cells.
Hold on, growing new brain cells. You're telling me meditation might be capable of that?
The research suggests it's a real possibility.
Wow.
It's like mindfulness is providing your brain with brand new tools to work with, not just sharpening the ones it already has.
That's incredible. What else might be going on?
Well, we know mindfulness is incredibly effective at reducing stress.
Right.
And we know that chronic stress can really wreak havoc on the brain.
Right, like how prolonged stress can actually shrink the hippocampus.
Exactly.
Which is crucial for memory.
Yeah.
And it can enlarge the amygdala, which processes fear and anxiety.
Exactly. So by reducing stress, mindfulness might be protecting the brain from those harmful effects. And even encouraging growth in the areas that stress tends to damage.
So it's almost like a shield for your brain, helping it stay healthy and resilient even when life gets chaotic.
That's a great way to put it. And the research is showing some interesting links between mindfulness and specific brain areas when it comes to stress. For example, one study found that after mindfulness training, people who reported feeling less stressed also showed reductions in gray matter density in the amygdala.
So less stress equals less activity in the fear center of the brain. Makes sense to me. But speaking of the brain's stress response, what about cortisol? You know, the stress hormone.
Good point. The findings on mindfulness and cortisol levels are a bit mixed, though.
Oh, really?
Yeah, some studies show mindfulness training can lower cortisol secretion, while others haven't found a significant effect.
From what I read in the neuroscience paper, it might be because mindfulness isn't necessarily better at lowering cortisol than other relaxation techniques.
Right.
It's more about the overall stress reduction.
That's possible.
Yeah.
But even if mindfulness isn't directly impacting cortisol, it's still positively impacting the brain through other pathways.
Interesting.
Which brings us to another exciting area of research, BDNF.
BDNF, what's that?
So BDNF stands for brain-derived neurotrophic factor.
Okay.
It's a protein that basically acts like fertilizer for your brain, supporting the growth and survival of neurons.
Wow.
It's crucial for neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to adapt and change.
So BDNF is kind of like a superpower booster for your brain.
I like that.
Helping it grow and change for the better.
Yeah, that's a good way to think about it.
Cool.
And the problem is that stress can actually reduce BDNF levels.
Oh.
Which in turn can impair neuroplasticity and leave the brain more vulnerable.
So if mindfulness reduces stress, does that mean it could boost BDNF?
Yeah.
And actually enhance the brain's ability to change?
You got it.
Awesome.
Some forms of mindfulness training have been directly linked to increased BDNF levels. This suggests mindfulness might be protecting the brain at a molecular level. Boosting the growth and resilience of those brain cells.
Honestly, the more we talk about this, the more convinced I am that mindfulness should be a regular part of everyone's routine.
I agree.
Yeah.
But we should remember this is still a relatively new field of research.
Right.
We're just scratching the surface.
Yeah.
And there's a lot we still don't know.
We've mainly focused on the physical changes in the brain, but what I find most intriguing is how mindfulness affects self-awareness. You know, it seems to change our relationship with our thoughts and emotions, how we see ourselves.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's like mindfulness helps us step back and become more objective about our inner world. Instead of getting swept away by thoughts and feelings, we become more like observers.
Yeah, creating that space between ourselves and our internal chatter. I'm curious to know how this shift in self-awareness actually shows up in the brain.
Well, one key player is the insula, which we talked about earlier. It plays a big role in integrating sensation and emotion. and it's thought to be heavily involved in self-awareness.
And that's the area that was thicker in meditators, right?
Right. Several studies have found increased activity in the insula during and after mindfulness practice.
Interesting.
It seems that mindfulness makes us more aware of our bodily sensations,
Okay.
our emotions, and our thoughts,
Yeah.
all in a more present-centered way.
There was also something in the research about the default mode network, or DMN.
Oh yeah, the DMN.
What exactly is that?
So the default mode network is a set of brain regions that become active when we're not focused on a specific task.
Okay.
It's often linked to daydreaming,
Okay.
mind wandering, and dwelling on the past or worrying about the future.
So it's sort of like our brain's autopilot mode.
Yeah.
When we're not actively engaged in something.
Right.
What does this have to do with mindfulness?
Well, studies have shown that people who meditate regularly tend to have less activity in the DMN, specifically in areas like the medial prefrontal cortex
Okay.
and the posterior cingulate cortex
smart.
compared to non-meditators.
So mindfulness is actually quieting down the areas of the brain that tend to get us stuck in those cycles of overthinking and self-criticism.
Exactly.
Wow.
And some researchers think this decreased DMN activity could be linked to the feelings of peace and tranquility that many meditators experience.
That makes a lot of sense. Less noise in your head,
Yeah.
more peace of mind. But didn't the research also say that mindfulness doesn't just decrease DMN activity?
Right.
It changes how different parts of the brain communicate.
It does, and that's a crucial point.
Okay.
It's not just about isolated brain regions. It's about the connections between them.
Okay.
Mindfulness seems to strengthen the functional connectivity between certain areas,
Okay.
like the posterior cingulate cortex,
Okay.
the dorsal anterior cingulate cortex,
Okay.
and the dorsolateral prefrontal cortex.
Those are some mouthful names.
Yeah, they are.
What do those areas do?
Well, they're all involved in self-awareness,
Okay.
attention, and cognitive control.
So think of it like mindfulness is optimizing your brain's communications system,
Exactly.
allowing different regions to work together more smoothly and effectively.
That's a great way to think about it.
So it's like mindfulness isn't just adding new tools to your brain's toolkit.
Right.
It's also upgrading the operating system,
I like that.
helping everything run more efficiently.
Yeah, and this improved communication might be why mindfulness is linked to improvements in so many cognitive functions,
Like what?
like attention, working memory, and emotional regulation.
It's incredible to think that simply paying attention to the present moment can have such a profound effect on our brains.
It really is amazing.
Are there any limitations to this research we should be aware of?
Of course, it's important to remember that this is still a relatively young field of research.
Okay.
Most of the studies have involved relatively small sample sizes.
Right.
And we need more research to replicate the findings and really understand the long-term effects.
The paper mentioned that most of the research has focused on shorter periods of mindfulness training, like a few weeks or months. So we don't yet have a clear picture of how the brain changes over years or decades of practice.
That's true, and there's also the factor of individual differences. People respond to mindfulness differently.
Yeah.
And factors like personality, genetics, and life experiences likely play a role in how their brains change.
So while the research is incredibly promising,
Yeah.
it's important to remember that mindfulness isn't a magic bullet.
Right.
It's a practice that takes time, effort, and consistency to truly reap the benefits.
Absolutely. But I think what we've discussed today really shows how mindfulness can reshape the brain
Yeah,
and ultimately enhance our mental well-being.
for sure. It's really exciting.
Yeah.
It's almost like science is catching up with what people who have been meditating for centuries have known all along.
Right.
I can't wait to see where the research goes from here. Knowing that meditation has such profound effects on the brain, I'm curious about its potential for helping people with mental health challenges. What does the research say about that?
It's a great question, and it's one that researchers are actively exploring.
Yeah.
Mindfulness-based interventions are showing real promise
Okay.
for conditions like anxiety, depression, addiction, and even chronic pain.
That makes sense, especially considering the impact on emotional regulation and stress reduction that we've been talking about. The research even mentioned mindfulness-based therapies being studied for attention deficit disorders.
Yeah, and some of the initial findings are really encouraging. One study focused on people with generalized anxiety disorder and found that mindfulness training actually led to changes in brain activity,
Interesting. Like where?
specifically in the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala.
Okay.
which correlated with a decrease in anxiety symptoms.
So it's not just about people feeling better subjectively.
Right.
There are actual measurable changes happening in the brain
Exactly.
that support emotional regulation and reduce anxiety.
Precisely. And similar results are emerging for other conditions like depression and addiction. Mindfulness seems to help people shift their relationship with their thoughts, emotions, and cravings, leading to positive changes in behavior and overall well-being.
That's really promising, but the research paper did caution that more research is needed.
Yeah.
Of course, particularly larger scale clinical trials.
Right.
We need to better understand the effectiveness of mindfulness interventions and which practices work best for specific conditions.
That's true, and it's important to note that mindfulness isn't meant to replace traditional therapies or medication.
Right.
It often works best as a complementary approach
Yeah.
alongside other forms of treatment.
One thing that struck me in the research was the potential for mindfulness to help us understand just how much the brain can change. If something as simple as paying attention can alter neural pathways, imagine what other possibilities might be out there.
That's what's so exciting about this field.
Yeah.
Mindfulness research is giving us a whole new way to look at the brain, highlighting its amazing capacity for change and its potential for growth and transformation throughout life.
It's a powerful reminder that we're not limited by the brains we're born with.
Right.
Our experiences and the choices we make can shape our brains in truly profound ways.
For sure.
And the research on mindfulness is a perfect example of that. By cultivating present moment awareness, we can create positive changes in our brains that ripple out into every aspect of our lives.
It's incredible.
So what does this all mean for you, our listener? We've just skimmed the surface here.
Yeah, just a taste.
But it's clear that mindfulness meditation is much more than just a relaxation technique.
Oh, for sure.
It's a powerful tool for reshaping your brain and transforming your experience of the world.
If you're intrigued by what we've discussed today, I encourage you to explore the research further.
Yeah, great idea.
Dive into the work of researchers like Sarah Lazar,
Okay.
Britta Holzel, Amishi Ha, and Norman Farb, and see what resonates with you. Or even try incorporating a few minutes of mindfulness into your daily routine and see what you notice.
And here's a final thought to leave you with.
Okay.
If simply paying attention can have such a profound impact on the brain, imagine the untapped potential that exists within each of us.
It's amazing to think about.
The possibilities truly are limitless.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us.
Of course, until next time.